In this conversation, I'm going to talk to Charlotte Laing, who is the founder of a company called the Content Emporium here in Bristol. She's managed to go from being the unnoticed and underappreciated journalist into the founder of a multi-million-pound agency. Let's hear her story. Charlotte, thanks for coming to talk with me today at the NatWest UnNoticed Entrepreneur podcast series. So tell us a little bit about you and the business that you've built over the last decade.
Yes, no problem. I'm Charlotte Laing, and I'm the founder and director of the Content Emporium. We are now a team of, growing weekly, quite honestly, but it's approximately 53, 54 people at the moment. And we create content for large brands. So we work predominantly for shopping centres, and we are that kind of plug-in marketing resource that big brands really struggle to have in-house, because I think the skills you need now are so diverse across social media, web content and everything that they really need some support, and we can offer that at a high level, really good quality.
So you're based in Bristol, but
we are.
Your clients, I'm assuming, are all over the country.
Indeed, from Blue Water in Kent to St David's Cardiff, Buchanan Galleries in Glasgow. So yeah, right across the country.
Okay, so how have you managed to build the Content Emporium from a base in Bristol to becoming really a national content company? And that's a hell of a journey, because it's not easy to get such large clients, especially when you're an owner-operator rather than one of the big blue-chip agencies.
That's right. I think at the beginning, it was just me. I was essentially a freelancer, sole trader, and I approached one shopping centre actually to create a magazine for them. That magazine then went so well. It was such a good magazine that people really loved, that they said, oh, well, you should just run our website for us as well. Oh, maybe take on our email marketing, social media. So it just really grew really organically from having done one really good project that they trusted us. And so we've grown as an agency, and I've hired people to meet the skill set needed by the shopping centres. Once one shopping centre worked with us, several others then saw what we'd done and said, oh, I want what they've got. That's better than what we've got. So that's really how it's come about, by word of mouth.
But what was your background before you started the Content Emporium? What were you doing?
I was a magazine editor. So I was based in Wales at the time, in Cardiff. I was a magazine editor for Media Wales. So I was editing a glossy women's magazine. So that was I was from a very editorial journalism background, essentially, trying to make things genuinely interesting, genuinely nice photography. On the website, there'd be genuinely good videography and everything that people would genuinely want to read. And I think that's what I was taking into the marketing space. So I was coming in quite fresh, not with a marketing sensibility, but from a journalism and editorial sensibility, and bringing that into marketing, which was quite refreshing for the people hiring us.
So how do you see those as different, the marketing sensibilities, as you call it, and the editorial sensibilities? Because when people think about content, they may think of them both being the same thing, a smiley face, not happy customer, and not see the difference. How do you define the difference?
I think marketing has actually come on leaps and bounds, but I think there was a bit of a tendency in marketing to just go straight for the sell, to kind of say, this is a great product, come and buy it, in a very stilted marketing way. Whereas we would weave a story around it about the lifestyle maybe you could have if you had that product, or if you came and spent more time in this shopping centre, the kind of person that you would be at that point would be the kind of person you might want to be. So I think we were kind of creating a lifestyle, as we did when we were working on magazines, a lifestyle that people might aspire to. And that's what we were bringing into the marketing space.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Really.
So you're really thinking also more about the customer journey and the backstory, rather than the marketing being sort of top of funnel work, and taking a much broader perspective.
That's it. I think in a way, especially these days since COVID, we're not selling the shirt that someone might buy, because they might buy that online. We're selling the experience of going in and buying that shirt and spending time, maybe having a meal at the same time. And so we're kind of selling an experience around a purchase, really.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because as people can shop online, they don't need a relationship anymore with the venue or the vendor or the merchant. But experiences are becoming such a key part of brand building, aren't they, as well?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's where our skills as really good copywriters come in, and the fact that the photography that we'll create is the kind of photography you might find in a magazine or on a website you might read for fun, rather than a website that's trying to sell you something.
Charlotte, let's just look at the transition, because you had a successful job in South Wales, and then you said, well, I just approached a shopping centre, but something happens in between. There's that entrepreneur moment, isn't there? What was that for you, from the security and the fulfillment of working for a magazine to pitching up to a large shopping centre and saying, hey, I can do this for you?
I think in the role I was in with my journalism job, I felt that I was giving too much to the role. Really, I'm quite somebody who will overwork or give a lot of myself to a role. So I think that it was almost obviously not being monetized because I got my salary, but I was overworking in that role and really creating something really good. And I thought, maybe I should do that for myself and actually get paid for the extra mile I'm willing to run. So that's what I decided to do, really, and just walk away and try and set something up on my own. It was a very lucky first client, I think. It did involve a bit of persistence. I did send an email, then another email, then I phoned them. And, eventually they really wanted a magazine. It's just I had to keep knocking the door to make sure that got over the line.
Okay, I'm going to catch you there, because you said a bit of luck, but I think we all know that entrepreneurship is about a lot of hard work and some courage too. The luck is kind of how we maybe dress it up later. You're being very modest. But you had that moment where you thought, I'm overworking, and so many of us have had that time where we're not really getting paid for what we're worth, and there comes that genesis of an idea. When you thought about a shopping centre, why a shopping centre? Just take us through that first client, because that's often the hardest client to win, is the first one. Yeah. So why did you go for that shopping centre?
I think it felt really within my my skill set, in that I was already writing about fashion, beauty, food and drink. It was all the lovely things that I was writing about in the magazine world. And I thought I could offer that to them, and they could then have this editorial voice, which would really benefit them. So I think that's where the shopping centre idea came from, that I saw it as all the world is there, if you like. There's all the different aspects of things I'd like to write about. And I could unearth the stories from within the centre. We could have human interest pieces. And I saw it as quite a rich seam of potential, what is now called content, but actually at the time wasn't really called content. I only named the business the Content Emporium 5 years after this, actually, and the word content wasn't as prevalent as it is now.
No, exactly. So when did you start the Content Emporium?
So I launched it into a limited company and took on my first employee around 2015. So this is about 10 years ago now. And it was actually preceded by me deciding that I was 34 and probably if I was going to have a baby, I should probably have a baby. But I had built this fledgling business, which, had a couple of, I think at the time I had 3 or 4 shopping centres that I was working with, even by then, just as a solo entrepreneur. And I thought, well, I can either just put it in the bin, tell them, bye, I'm gone, or I can hire someone to try and keep it going while I'm away having a baby. And I did. And I hired my first employee, who is now my chief operations officer. So this is over 10 years later. She's my second in command and very much running the business alongside me now. So she was, again, I'm going to say lucky, because she was a lucky hire. I've definitely nurtured her, but she was a lucky hire because she was really, really good.
Well, but I also know, having hired, my first person, that then it changed from being me working when I wanted to work and the clients I wanted to work to paying a salary at the end of every month and providing an office and a computer. And it changed the relationship I had with my clients as well. Can you just take us through, what did you have to do as a person, as an entrepreneur, once you hired, what's her name, by the way?
Well, her name's actually Charlotte as well.
Hey, Charlotte, okay, the two Charlottes.
I was trying to clone myself and it did successfully work. Yeah, so we call her Char because we need to differentiate. Okay. So Char, yeah.
So do you want to just take us through, because that first hire, in my experience, is when you go from having a company, which fulfills your own needs, to needing to fulfill the needs of your people as well as your clients, because you've got to retain them, keep them employed, keep them engaged. How did you have to change how you managed the business?
I think I've always been quite open as an entrepreneur. So I think I just went through it with her. I just sort of experienced the growing of the business and the hiring of her with her. Quite frankly, I just made it quite clear how much money was coming in from the clients, what work we had to do, how we needed to win some more. Should we hire a third person? We had these discussions together. So I think I actually decided I couldn't draw down an iron curtain between me and this person who I was sitting in a room with all day, every day, and actually just let her see the growth of the business for herself.
Okay.
How are we going to set up a server that we can both use? Oh, how let's figure out how we do that. How are we going to, all sorts of things, migrate to a different email platform? How we go, there was lots of things that we needed to do. And I just sort of talked about it.
But that's great, because some people hire somebody else and see this sort of almost boss-employee relationship, right?
Yeah, I struggle with the boss label, really. I don't identify much with it, which I'm starting to try to slightly elevate myself above the team now that there's so many of them. I've kept very open doors with everybody through the journey.
Well, let's just talk about that, because when you scale a business, my experience of growing an agency as well is that you get to 4 or 5 people, you know everybody's names. You can be involved in helping to check their work, for example, help to sort their computers. And as you get bigger and bigger, it gets harder. So let's just talk about the content empowerment, because you've grown it now to being a multi-million-pound business. You've got 50 over staff, serving multiple clients across the country. Charlotte, let's just talk about some of the challenges that you've faced in scaling. Where should we start? Do you want to talk first of all about the recruitment side and how you start to find the right people? Because the organization changes, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I think every scaling journey will be a bit of a roller coaster, in the sense that you kind of go through moments that are difficult, and then you have a moment of when you're in your flow and you've got the right number of people and they've got the right skills and the right amount of money's coming in and it's all great, and then you can reach a sticky point again where that's not true anymore. And then so I've been through a couple of those waves and kind of can see how it works out. I think from my personal point of view, I think around the 1 million mark, I think I've heard other agency founders saying this and other business founders saying that when you get to about 1 million, you can kind of still have quite close contact with your staff. You know them quite well. The amount of work coming in is a lot, but you can kind of keep a handle on it personally. You can kind of understand what all the work is, and you know where the projects are in their stage of completion. And you haven't necessarily got to have loads of managers in place. You can have a few people managing, but you don't have to have a whole layer. And I think that breaking through that barrier was a tough moment in the business, really, which was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, where we needed to try and break through that barrier.
Okay, so when you had that barrier, you say you start to get beyond about 8 to 10 people. In my experience, you need to have people to help manage the people and the systems as well.
Yeah.
What steps did you take to do that? Because a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck at the million, want to be in control, want to still have the customers, maybe still do the banking and finance on the weekend. Mm-hmm. What did you have to do to change?
I had quite a frank conversation with our biggest client, actually, because I needed to get to the point. I think I'd been charging at a level which was kind of fine if I was just paying people to just do the work. And so that's where we got a bit stuck. I think we'd agreed some rates with the client, which would just about cover the staff only, but no management, no strategy, no finance function, as you say, no HR function. So we got to a bit of a barrier where I knew that the revenue coming in wouldn't allow us to go beyond the staff that we had and get the right level of management so that we could be the agency we needed to be. So I just had a very frank conversation and kind of asserted, what we were offering and what more we could offer as well if we became a slightly larger agency that had a strategy function, had a better finance function so that the invoicing was done better, had a management layer, so they could have a single point of contact where they could talk to someone really quite senior, and then the work would just get done rather than them having to reach into different parts of our team. So this was really well received, which I had, it was actually through the NatWest Accelerator, which I was on at the time, which this possibility occurred to me because my mentor sort of said, why are you thinking about just the cost of, you're thinking about yourself as a cost to your client. You need to think about the value you're adding to your client. And it was like a revelatory moment. I was like, of course I need to think about that rather than, I was obsessing over, this number of thousands, maybe that's a bit expensive. And I think I started to think more in the terms of the value we could add to them if we were a slightly larger agency with the functions that they really needed us to have. So it was an amazing conversation. Had some support from the NatWest procurement team at that point as well, which my mentor here put me in touch with. So I had some quite open conversations where they were able to share how a large company procures services, which, I felt like a little fish in a big pond, really, from that point of view. So, it was really a turning point in the business, I think, just being able to renegotiate the terms and come away with a better contract to deliver even more work in the end, it turned out. Because I think the client actually appreciated the conversation because it made it seem we were thinking like a big agency. We wanted to deliver exceptional services. So it was all really positive.
Yeah, but I think what's great there is that you had that ambition, but there must have been that also anxiety because as you grow the business, certainly there's that danger of over trading, isn't there? You get more clients, but then you've got to get more staff to serve. And sometimes the cash flow is that you've got more people to deliver and more payroll to make before the clients are coming in.
Absolutely. And there've been some tricky cash flow moments for sure when, that you're just waiting for an invoice to get paid before the end of the month, before payroll comes in, and you're kind of checking that your mum's got some spare cash that she could maybe put across into your bank in case it doesn't come in time. Those kind of conversations. I think most scaling businesses, if you've not got equity funding or, you've not got a big bank loan behind you, then that's the way that it goes. The staff get hired, the money sometimes doesn't come in till a bit later. Yeah,
we normally pay staff on 30 days and clients, especially big companies, pay 60, 90 days, right? But Charlotte, I'd love to just hear from you what you learned from the NatWest procurement team, because that's access to wisdom that is very hard to come by, right? Because on the whole, if we're going to be talking to a company to sell our services, procurement is someone that you fill out the form, they may be on the other side of a do not reply email address. But you were given access to the procurement team at NatWest, which is amazing. What did they tell you about how that works? Because, that's an insight that most people aren't ever going to get.
I think they were able to share what the procurement team with a large company would be hoping to guard against. So I think because we were relatively small, and I think the questions that were coming in and the delving into everything, from our financials to our team structure and everything, I found it quite, it's quite invasive. But so the NatWest procurement team reassured me it's just they want to make sure that you're solid. So that, if you've committed to deliver a multi-million-pound contract to a big company, they want to know that contract can really be delivered. You've got the financial security to see it through. You've got the team is really solid to deliver that. So I think that made it much. I felt just reassured that standard practice. It's only trying to make sure that the service they're paying for is really going to get delivered. I knew I was going to deliver it, so I kind of felt like, these questions are not needed. But I can totally see why with retrospect.
And what's interesting when you get to bigger and bigger clients, which you really need to grow a business to be larger and larger, is that you're selling to multiple stakeholders in an organization, aren't you? You might have the marketing team looking at what you're providing for content and procurement. So you're having to balance the two, aren't you? And what were the expectation differences of the clients, the shopping centers, as you started to grow the content emporium? And it sounds they bought into you and the vision of what you could offer. But what were they starting to ask for that may have been different from when they saw you as Charlotte who comes in and we meet Charlotte and now she's got a bigger company?
That's it. I think number one, I think a layer of presenting ourselves well. So I think I'd always thought, well, I'm doing work for them. Doesn't really matter what we look like as a brand or how we show off about what we've done. But I think that's actually, I was being a bit blind to the importance of that, especially within a big organization where, as you say, multiple stakeholders need to buy into us being their big agency. So actually how we look digitally, how we present reports to them, how we, when we present work to them, even how we present the work, the document, the work comes in, even little things like that. I think I've really had my eyes open to how important those signifiers are of whether you're a respectable big agency.
Right. And as you say, when big companies buy companies, they're no longer buying employees, right? And so mindset wise, you kind of almost went in like an alternative employee, but now you're a business partner.
That's
and you have to be perceived as that, right?
Yes, we had to show that we had the right level of strategy and management in place. I think, again, they didn't just want to deal with me all the time anymore. They wanted to see that I had really solid people who they would equally have hired to run different parts of the business. As we expanded across social media, web content, CRM, design, they wanted a really strong contact in each part of the business. And I think also social media, I mean, literally, I remember the first time we were handed the keys to a social media account, it was very casual. It was very like, how about you run our Facebook account? Whereas now there's so much sort of strategy, and not just a social media strategy, but a platform strategy. So there's a TikTok strategy. We've launched TikTok for them as well, which was a big kind of strategic piece of work, which we investigated where we should be in that space, how we should present those quite corporate brands in an irreverent social media space. So delivering the strategy across all the different channels, and just proving that they can totally rely on us really is the change.
And presumably across, as you say, across different channels. As you're the content queen, I suppose, right? with the business you've built, what guidance would you give to entrepreneurs that are building their business who maybe can't afford a large agency like yours, but need to build their brand? What advice would you give people?
I would say make content that's relatable. So I think across social media, I wouldn't put out content that's too kind of carefully branded. I think people often make some graphics. They'll get, we were talking about Canva at a previous conversation. So they'll get some Canva and they'll just, make some graphics that they think, oh, this is in brand. And then they'll put those on the social media channels, which I would hesitate to do that. I mean, from the experimentation we've done, putting out a graphic with words on is often really not a good way to go. LinkedIn's probably the exception.
Right.
But I think, and having consistency across your channels, so having a strong brand look and tone of voice as well, and making sure that you're known for that across all of your channels. That would be my advice. And I think if you can't afford an agency to film for you, just make sure that you set aside time every week to actually create that content, because I think it's all very well to have a kind of a plan to have some content, but you have to actually do that content.
Right. And so do you think content now is really king for both entrepreneurs, but also these large shopping center clients that you're serving? I
think it's been absolutely huge, actually, because I think it's allowed them to establish a voice in the community. So we increasingly are bringing in local voices, whether that's employees who actually work at the shopping centre, or there'll be a lot of content we do guest interactions. And I think that it's really helped entrench these shopping centres at the heart of their communities, which for them is the golden ticket. That's really, they want to be top of mind. You're going to go for a day out on a Saturday. Where are you going to go? And I think that's been so valuable for them to just become more beloved, I think, through their social content. People literally in the comments are like, I absolutely love this content. Like, so we, some of it is so local, so entertaining, and really, speaks to the community that they're sort of part of it.
Okay. And now when we talk about community, you were part of the NatWest Accelerator community. What role has sort of the community here played for you as you've grown the business? Because going from, zero with you and Charlotte, or Shah as you call her, to 50 plus people, you're building your own community, but you're also part of an entrepreneur community. So how important do you feel that is, and what role should entrepreneurs look for in that kind of a community?
I think it was absolutely amazing experience for me to be in the NatWest Accelerator. When I arrived, I didn't quite realise how lonely I was, in terms of I was surrounded by my team, but I was in a very particular position where I had all the financial burden of the company, all the kind of client burden, in a sense, that the ultimate client burden, in that I had to retain the client, all the responsibility for their salaries and, their well-being. And it felt quite heavy at the time, I think. And nobody I could particularly talk to about all of those things. My husband would listen, but I don't, it was sort of, he wasn't in the same boat, let's say. So it was different. But I think arriving here, having a mentor, which I had Jason as a mentor, and the support of the wider entrepreneurial community here, so the mentors at NatWest, but also all the other entrepreneurs in the space, just having really open, frank conversations about where I was, what was the next step I was hoping to achieve, and having their support as well. So a bit of cheerleading from the entrepreneurs here as well was like really, really helpful. I used to, go home just with a different mindset after a NatWest day. So a day I'd been in here, I would almost skip out of the building feeling lighter from having been in here. Yeah,
it's amazing how different it can feel, just to feel like you're not alone, right?
Yes.
And there are other people on the journey, and that you're not necessarily making the mistakes on your own. We all make mistakes as entrepreneurs, but other people are there to support you and help you to pick yourself up and keep going. On the mental health side, I do want to touch on that, because we talk more and more about entrepreneurs and the journey that we go on. What have you found works for you, Charlotte? Because as an entrepreneur, you do have to carry, like a parent, the weight of expectations. I'm sure you're like me. I try not to burden my wife and my children with what I'm going through. What's been sort of for you best practice in terms of dealing with this, with the stresses and the strains of growing the business?
I think actually being more open about it. So I think the more I talk to the entrepreneurs in here, and actually I think then that opened the floodgates even more for me to talk to my team about it, actually, about, some real conversations about the clients that we needed to have. I think openness has been really key, and actually I'm not somebody who will try and hide, if I'm finding things tough. So I'll kind of go in and say, I'm feeling quite stressed today, actually, because there's just a lot going on. And I'll say that to the team. I won't hide that from them and just kind of not come in or something, or be slamming things around. I'll actually just say how I'm feeling. So I think that's been really helpful. I think having the mentor support here at NatWest has been, again, really transforming. There've been a couple of times when it was particularly difficult, and I'd walk into a mentor session and just kind of, put my head in my hand and go, I don't know how I'm going to get through this week. Like, there's a lot going on. There's just such a lot I have to achieve this week, and it feels, almost too much. But just knowing someone's got your back, really, and is actually aware that that's going on for you, checking in on you, saying, how's that gone? It was really just really helpful, I think. So just knowing you've got a bit of support, even if they don't do anything practical, knowing that somebody's listening.
Sure. One that comes to mind is, the question of, we say, I've got to do this, and why, as an entrepreneur or as a person, why do you need to grow your business? Because as entrepreneurs, we put ourselves under incredible pressure. You may have been overworked and overlooked, but you had a normal salary. You could spend time with your daughter. So why do you want to put yourself through growing a business like the Content Emporium?
I think it's got some internal motion, the business almost, that you're in a system. Then you've hired people, the clients are really keen for you to do more work for them, and it's kind of in like a self-perpetuating, like an engine that's almost running, and so you are then aware that you're trying to function within that self-propelling engine, and if you like. So I think it would have felt like a huge failure to ever say, stop the bus, I'm getting off the bus, it's going too fast for me. So I think I've always felt this responsibility, I suppose, to kind of keep the pace with how fast the business needs to go. I think I'm also just at heart quite an ambitious person and quite competitive person. I always have been quite a competitive person, and kind of the thread of entrepreneurialism runs quite strongly through me as well. So just the thought of scaling a business is actually quite exciting, and that I can really make it is actually quite motivating for me as well.
Yeah, so. And that's what. And I want to come to that question of competition, because you've built a company, but it's not in isolation. If you build an agency, it's an extremely competitive market. You've got all the big players, the Omnicoms, the WPPs, the Digital Veritases. How have you competed against these big companies who would love to have those shopping centers as clients?
Yes, they would. We have delivered exceptional work, is the truth. And so there have been, at the periphery of what we do, there have been some bigger agencies who've kind of been taking maybe small roles here and there, even bigger roles occasionally. And it's just, without exception, been really unsuccessful, actually. So I think the delivery, we're very strong on delivery, and there's a lot of work needs to be done. And so, a big agency can come in with a huge strategy proposal where they say, this is what you should do, or I've got a bright idea, which we can also have as well. But then the delivery is not there. There's a kind of fill in a form, and in 2 weeks' time, maybe we'll get a copywriter to work on your poster that you need made, or your billboard. Whereas we're working on it on the day. So we're immediately involved, like our client's right-hand person, and they can talk to us daily, have a daily conversation with the people actually doing the work. I think that's what's been our saving grace that's allowed us to cut through.
And in essence, that's a very positive message for anyone thinking about running their own business, is that you don't have to worry about the big companies, because if you focus on delivering great service and being there for clients, actually the clients really appreciate that, because once you've taken care of the corporate side, you do need to look like a trustworthy brand to work with, don't you? You can't look like a mum and pop shop, because they've got to go through the due diligence.
Yeah.
But they want the corporate reputation side and credibility to safeguard their own internal compliance. But they want the kind of delivery
they do
that Charlotte and Shah can deliver.
Yes.
Because you're passionate about delivering quality and helping them to get to their community.
And we're not hiring, a junior. So, I think a lot of big pitches, there would be an over-promising, and, they bring out the big guns for the pitch where they say, we'll do this and we'll do this. And we've worked on the Nike account, and we've worked on the, whatever, big brands. And then in the end, who ends up working on the account is some junior they've just hired out of college who has never, used a laptop before. I'm exaggerating.
They used to call it the pitch and switch model, right? The pitch and switch model.
Pitch and switch, I didn't know that
phrase.
It's
called pitch and switch, where you have big agency comes in, and really for them, it's all about shareholder value. And so they always would take as much of the money as they could and give it to the investors. Whereas people like, you running your own business would reinvested in the team.
I genuinely want to just do a really good job. I would be mortified to misrepresent what we would give to somebody and then give them an inferior service. I think I would always, if anything, I'd be concerned, how can I spread my good people across enough work? I think it would be completely alien to operate in that way. I think I would feel very unsatisfied with the work we were delivering.
So the challenge that I think many of us face when we're entrepreneurs and scaling is retaining that essential passion and energy and quality and attention to detail, but scaling it so that we don't get burnt out. And there are so many agencies that fade away because the founder doesn't scale. Charlotte, how have you managed to take that passion, that attention to detail that your clients really love, and how have you managed to get that into the organization so that every touch point for a Blue Water with the Content Emporium feels like it's a consistent experience? How have you managed to scale that magic Charlotte moment?
I think I'm quietly quite demanding, and I think people know that. I think I have quite high expectations. I think most people in the company would say, I mean, I don't particularly like the word nice, but I think they would think that I'm, a kind employer, but also they can sense that I'm really bothered by things being good. And I think that that's permeated through the whole company. And I think that the people I've hired in senior roles also really care that things are really good. So my creative director really cares, and if something looks, if I'm quite literally, if something's slightly out of alignment in something that we're putting through, he will take it back to the stage where it's got to get put back. And same for the account director on the biggest client. My chief operations officer, obviously, who's been with me for 12 years. Everybody really cares that things are as good as they can be, and will take that Charlotte voice, I think, on themselves and know that we have to maintain that quality.
So you're a guardian of quality, and you create that threshold, which of course is what the clients still demand. What about systems? Because as you scale a business, and I ran an agency with offices in 3 different countries, and each individual person coming on creates another set of how they can see something to be done.
Yes.
Can you just take us through how you've scaled the systems as well? Because a business can't grow without the growth in the infrastructure.
That's right. I think we're still getting there. I think there's more to be done. Every day we're kind of like, how could we make this run more smoothly? I think you never win that battle, really. And I think every stage of growth, every extra 10 people, you kind of think, oh, maybe there's some way we could make this more cohesive. We use a Trello system at the moment. So the work flows through the company in a Trello system. Everybody has the same procedure and is very much trained on how that needs to look. In terms of social management, we've used Sprout Social, which is a very sort of high-end, expensive social management tool, which means that everything is in one place and there's lots of systems within that allow you to trigger alerts to people when something happens, or there's that kind of brings us a lot of systems that we use. We're just onboarding an agency management software called Synergist, which I think is very popular in the agency world. And that's going to be the key to unlocking right from a brief through to the workflow delivery to the invoice exactly, and the time tracking within that as well. That will kind of run right through the agency. So we're hoping that's the next smoothing system that we put in. Really, that will help.
So as we grow the business, we've also got to grow both the team, keep the culture, but build the systems.
Yeah.
We have to talk about cash flow because a business, really can have everything, but if it doesn't have cash, it's over. Without going to too much detail, if you like, but how are you managing the cash flow for growth? Because that's often a really sticky subject for people.
Yes, I think at the moment we are in a really good position. We've got long contracts and we are able to invoice ahead of work delivery often, which is very important for us. It just means that there's never a gap between having to pay the team and having to get paid for the work and getting paid for the work. So that's actually quite transformative from a cash flow point of view. Again, it's an awkward conversation I've had to have with a client at a certain point, which was a couple of years ago, and I had to say, this is tricky for us. We're a small agency, and actually it would be so beneficial if we could have different payment terms. So I think that's what I'd advise to other agencies where that's a problem. If you're valuable to your client, have that conversation. They would want to help you. Yeah. They want you to be able to deliver the service. They don't want you to not be able to deliver.
And Charlotte, I think that's such a great mindset point that if you go into the client feeling sort of mendicant or sort of, oh, please give me the work,
Yes,
then
that's it.
you do the work and hope to invoice later. But actually you have to have the courage, don't you, to say, actually, I'm going to invoice you. I do 80% in advance. And if they say no, then actually it's often not the client that I really need, because I'm otherwise carrying the risk.
Yeah.
So it's great that you're structuring your invoicing so that you're taking the risk out of it, because you've got to hire the staff and pay third parties. So I wanted to touch on that, is this strategy of make sure you get paid at least all your fixed costs before you do the work, even if you leave a tail of the profit at the end.
Yes, that's it.
Which is,
So we can just about get by with, if there's ad hoc projects that come in, we can get by with invoicing them once they're done, because that's trailing towards, either the final VAT payment of the year or the profit margin. So it's things that can wait until that money does come in. But the core amount, I think it's super important that you get that paid up as soon as possible.
Good.
And a good large client would want that for you, I think.
Yeah. And actually, once they've made the decision to work with you, they're more interested in business continuity, because they've made that decision, put you through procurement.
Absolutely. That was really clear from the procurement process, that's what they cared about. They cared about the reliability of us as an agency. They didn't care whether they paid exactly the same amount, but 30 days here or later. They didn't mind about that.
Good. So another sort of a piece of advice perhaps you're giving to people is be confident, ask for the money up front. And also for the large company, they're not paying from their own pockets. That's the difference with consumer marketing, isn't it? The consumer is paying out of their own wages, maybe, or salary, but the business is going, you're solving that problem. Actually, it's just cash flow for them. And they've probably got enough cash flow to pay a smaller agency and not worry about it anymore. Charlotte, let's move on a little bit. We've got to talk about the topic of the day, which is AI, because you're in the content business, and more and more people are building more and more content more and more quickly. What's your view on AI content as the content emporium? How do you think?
So a lot of our best content is it involves people. So the content that cuts through, and which we've been talking about for a number of years now, is entertaining. It's got people in it, people experiencing the spaces that we're talking about. And actually, I don't know how AI is in any time soon replacing those people. Then it's not. So I think we're in quite a fortunate position from that point of view, that we're not churning out infographics or text-based, as I just said, text-based graphics that could get put on social, or even, would never run a stock image or anything like that you could again generate through AI. In terms of the copywriting, we have so many micro conversations with our clients where, and you have to bear in mind social captions in particular are really quite short. We have so many micro conversations with them about exactly what their priorities are, how they want to slightly pivot the way they're presenting a certain center, that it's so much quicker to just get that from your brain, because we already have all of that information. So to try to put that into an AI model that could then write that caption as well as you could, and we've tested it. We've sort of tested what can it come up with, and it feels so much more generic and just something that the general public would be quite suspicious of. I think if they read it, they'd go, "It's AI."
And it's interesting that there's becoming a sort of a distrust of AI generated content, and of course, it's becoming quite vanilla, and so actually consumers
absolutely, and a proliferation of so much content is being outputted that it's the stuff that has humans in it that actually feels entertaining, that cuts through. And so I feel really lucky that we're in that space where that's the kind of agency we are. We're creating kind of personality-led content.
And I think as entrepreneurs that may be watching this, it should also be reassuring that the humanness, the authenticity of being themselves is actually what people are wanting, not mass-produced, AI graphics and content that just looks like a fire hose of content. So should be also very reassuring for people as well. Right.
Definitely. But we're very much not saying as an agency, AI, let's ignore it, put it in a box and leave it in the corner. I think we're thinking, how is this a tool that we can use to further our creativity? So how can we use it for gain? So there was a piece recently, there's an employee at Blue Water who is a bit of a superstar. We talk about her a lot. She's in some of our content. If we've got anything fun going on, we'll draft her in because she's a hoot. So there was a trend recently where people were using AI to create a vacuum-packed version of themselves as if they were a little doll. So we made a vacuum-packed version of Hev, who is this superstar at Blue Water. And that was a really popular piece of social content. We ran it on social, said, look who we found. It's Hev in a box. And she's got all like a Greg's pasty because she loves Greg's pasty. The things in the box are all very relevant to her. So we kind of needed to use our creative thinking to think, let's put Hev in a box. She's going to have a Greg's pasty with her. So we used it as another creative tool, really, to generate that content. But it was just as much work as other content that we do. So in that sense, I think, there were days before Photoshop, there were days before InDesign and all these tools we use now, and we just incorporate them into our creative processes.
Great. And as you say, we're really needing to use AI to augment the creative process. But Hev. She's Heather, but she prefers Hev. She already had a personality that was known. And so you were able to build off that. Whereas if you just done a packaged anybody, it wouldn't have had a backstory, right? So there's that authenticity. Speaking of stories then, Charlotte, as you start to look at the next 5 years, where do you see the Content Emporium going? Because you've got in front of large organizations, you've built a bigger and bigger team that's still keeping the passion and the integrity for the quality, but you're building systems. And you've solved the cash flow structurally because now you have known how to negotiate those terms. You're not in danger of basically over trading, getting more cost than income. So the road's open for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where do you go next, the next 5 years?
We feel really optimistic at the moment. I think we just feel I've got a really good senior leadership team in place. So there are 7 of us who are like plotting the next phase. And I think within 2 years, we're hoping to become more of a sort of 10 million turnover business. So that's the road ahead, essentially. And the pathway to get there has been plotted out through a method I learned at NatWest, actually through the backcasting method of, look at where you need to get to, because really we need to work with more big clients to kind of de-risk the business. So we've got several really large clients on the books. And we know what that end scenario needs to look like in 2 years. And we've kind of plotted out where we need to be in 2.5 years, where we need to be in 2 years, 1.5, 1, and therefore what we need to do in the next few weeks. So there's steps that we're taking that are slowly getting us there. So business development is a huge focus for us now. I think that we've kind of sort of recalibrated ourselves after winning quite a lot more work in the last year. And just about feel ready to now to go again. So we'll scale again. But I think it's the business development side of things, which I've always slightly put on the back burner because the work's come in organically. And I've always felt, I've doubled the business this year as it is. I can't actively go over more things. So, but now I'm feeling, let's just be really ambitious and actually don't prohibit the growth, actually go after the growth. So,
okay, that's great. So the backcasting has come from NatWest and the kind of conversations that you're having here, which is helping to really give some management structure. So you've come a long way from being an underappreciated journalist in Wales to running one of the UK's fastest growing content businesses.
That's it. I think I was always quite entrepreneurial, even. So I was a journalist, but I'd worked in economics before that. So I've kind of had like a financial entrepreneurial thread through my whole life, really. But I think I didn't really have those practical business skills until I came to NatWest. So I think learning models like backcasting, whereas I just thought there was just this future, this void of time ahead of us. And I thought, I'll grow the business, I suppose. But I think when you actually say, okay, in 3 years' time, we want to be here, and what that means for where you need to be in 2 years, 1 year, 6 months, a month from now, it makes you get real. It makes you actually take genuine steps that are genuinely going to get you to that point in 3 years where you want to be, rather than just muddling through.
Yeah. And is backcasting discussing revenue or staff or market positioning or systems?
It's a bit of a whole, I mean, I hope I'm presenting it correctly. I might be completely wrong to me,
Sure
but my version
how you're using it, that's
version of backcasting,
how you're using it, that's what's important.
Is actually like a vision for the whole company. So it's almost a vision. It's what the company should look like in 3 years' time. From everything from what I'm doing to the number of team members we might need to have and the revenue that might be coming in, the client base we might have. So the whole proposition really about what we would be at that point. And then you take each of those strands of the company and work out, so from a people point of view, if we're going to need to get to 200 people by that point in time, how do we take that back? How are we going to actually cope with being 80 people in 6 months' time? How are we going to, so it makes you go, oh, wow, I actually have to get a move on, and actually puts, as you say, get the systems in place early. If you genuinely want to go for that vision, don't hold back on getting the systems ready to get you there. I think in the past I've been a bit guilty of thinking, oh, well, at the moment I don't need a finance director. At the moment I don't need, but maybe if where you want to get in a year's time, you do need one, probably good to look at getting one now so that they can get you there.
So it sounds like being involved in the accelerators, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it helped us almost professionalize your approach to running a business rather than owning a company. Now you really see yourself as a business owner and scaling. Would that be fair?
I think I was sort of very caught up in successfully doing the work before I came here. And then it made me realize the exceptionalism of my role leading the business and actually needing to make the decisions that would get us to a future state that we need to be in. So, I think, it hugely helped. And all the entrepreneurial chatter in the room, I loved it. I just loved being part of it. It's really, really appeals to me. And I think, again, it made me take stock of the gold mine I'm sitting on, really, that I was aware I've got a really valuable business here that I need to really, really nurture.
Yeah, and you've been nurturing it and growing it really, really amazingly, Charlotte. So thanks for sharing your story. And
you're welcome.
If there's someone thinking about joining an accelerator, what would be your piece of advice?
I would absolutely embrace it and take what you can from it. Make friends. Kind of take all of the advice that you can from your mentor. And I think be quite open to change. Be aware that maybe where you are with your business at the moment is not quite where you need to be. I think the biggest success stories I've seen from my cohort here at NatWest has been people who've actually had to pivot their business quite a bit for different reasons. Either they change what they're offering or they completely change their mindset. So I think that would be it. Be open to change and really embrace all of the contacts that you'll make here.
Charlotte Laing, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. Speak soon.